I warmly welcome you to our webinar on how to build resilient regions. And it's hosted by North-Savo Comprehensive Security Cluster team and myself. I'm the team lead of the cluster team, and my name is Harriet Lonka. And it's a great pleasure to have this international webinar with our great colleagues, Paul Barnes from Griffith University and Bailey Lähdesmäki, who is resident in Kuopio but is at the moment joining us from the US. So we are spread in the 3 continents in today's webinar. And then we have our moderator, Petri Uusikylä. And I will give the floor to Petri.
Okay, thank you, Har. Good morning on my behalf, or good night to Bailey, and good afternoon to Paul. Welcome to this webinar, and for inviting me, Harriet, to start with. And the topic of today's seminar is how to build resilient regions. And that is really an important and timely topic, because now the resilience, first of all, is at the top of the agenda in many EU countries, but also at the European Union level with the new preparedness strategy. And we tend to forget that the local governments and regions are actually the key players when we talk about the resilience. We always talk about, national resilience, national preparedness plans, and tend to forget that the regions play an important role in building resilience and doing the preparedness work. We had a project a couple of years ago financed by the Research Council of Finland, and the topic of the project was the information resilience, and we studied the how to build information resilience in the complex societies and in the wicked environments. And Paul and Harriet wrote an excellent chapter to that book. Can you maybe, Harriet, put the next slide where the book is? And then I go back to the program. That's just open here. Yeah. So here's the book. It was published last year by Palgrave Macmillan. And the chapter actually Paul and Harriet wrote was the collaboration as part of security governance in resilient regions, a specific solution for non-specific problem. And that was an extremely important contribution to the book, which dealt with these issues mainly at the global, European or national level. To have the regional approach in our book was very valuable, and it has been noted also in the scientific community, this article. But let's go back to today's program. I will just briefly go through the program and introduce our wonderful panel and presenters. We will start by introductory note by Paul Barnes. We'll open the seminar. And Dr. Barnes is a Hill Senior Research Policy and Practice Fellow at the Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia. We are so happy, Paul, to have you with us today.
Delighted to be here.
Yes, great. And then we continue with Dr. Harriet Lonka's presentation about creating a resilient region, collaborative arrangements. And I think some of the issues that Harriet is going to talk about is based on the book that I mentioned, but of course also to her work at the moment in the Comprehensive Security Cluster at North-Savo Regional Council in Kuopio. Harriet also holds a Master of Sciences in Geology and Mineralogy, and her PhD was titled as Government Security Strategy as a Sharper of Legislation, a very timely topic. Even today, we are still dealing with the same issues. So happy, Harriet, that you can share your experience and wisdom with us today. And then let's move back to the program. Sorry, it's going back and forth. And then we are very pleased to have Bailey Lähdesmäki giving the commentary note on comprehensive security cluster in the context of EU cohesion policy. And that is very important topic now when there's a new policy guidelines set in the Brussels concerning the cohesion policy. And I wouldn't say that it's a paradigm shift, but it's a totally different approach to regional development compared to the previous program and project-based approach. And what does that mean in the context of resilience and especially in terms of enhancing innovation ecosystems? We'd be very happy to hear your analysis on ecosystem development vis-a-vis the more traditional institution-based regional development. So glad to have you with us today, Bailey. Okay, but now we move to the first presentation. Dr. Paul Barnes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Petri, and I'm very, very pleased to have been invited and very happy to come on board and work with you all on this very interesting topic. The research that Harriet and I put into this particular chapter starts on the basis that there are many sources of disturbance that impact regions. And in order to understand how the so-called polycrises and polycrisis phenomena manifest across regions, there's some critical consolidating factors that need to be considered. Now, I come to this as a practitioner academic, having worked in various government agencies in Australia and as an academic for many years. And the notion of what we used to do when I worked in government was business continuity planning as a manifestation of risk management. And the notion there was that elements of value in either communities, by metaphor, or organizations is what develops and delivers the value and the means and the purpose of that entity. So in order to understand our approach in this chapter from the basic conceptual research perspective, we needed to consolidate practical understandings that community preparedness or institutional preparedness had to be developed by and with members of that community or that institution. The other element that we wanted to emphasize was that compounding effects from disturbances and more wide area, temporally variable polycrises was a phenomenon. A trigger causing an initial disturbance cascades in compounding effects through space and time, through systems, through elements of communities, through elements of institutions. Future capability needs with respect to risk management to reduce the likelihood of those disturbances required institutions, government institutions, and private sector institutions and communities to work together. Not necessarily to do everything in common, but certainly to understand a co-development ecology. The issues that are impacting on communities who may be at the sharp end of a disturbance are not the same issues that government institutions that deal with regulating safety, regulating broader economic viability and sustainability in a regional or a local area, and those elements of that institutional responsibility related to emergency management. Equally, private sector, very important in terms of local economies. Private sector has to recover from disturbances as well, but equally private sector institutions, should they be working in a business continuity and a risk governance context, which I presume most private sector organisations would be, they also have parallel processes to secure and sustain and recover their business activity. So government, local communities and businesses in those communities have a role to play to collaborate and co-develop responses, and anticipation of future disturbance. The other element, going a little bit more wide and more broad, is that the effects, when they cascade through time and across region and geographical space, multi-scaled in their effect, and regional risk mitigation and adaptation efforts need to be planned through time. It's not the first 100 days post-disturbance, it's more likely to be the first 1,000 days. And many recovery strategies sometimes discount the length of time a community or a local grouping takes to recover back to where they were before disturbances occurred, if they can recover back to that space. But certainly there's a long tail known in terms of disaster response and responses to disturbances through time. And bringing all of this together, there are metaphors and useful analogies in terms of ecology and ecological public health. Some call that environmental public health, but it's a notion of bringing together air quality, soil quality, food quality, local economies, and the space in which people live. So the notion of community safety is enhanced by collaborative thinking. Next slide, please, Harriet. So when disturbances occur, they hardly ever going to be simple. They're complex. If you look at the top left-hand corner of this image, there is a natural threat, either a hurricane or a cyclone, as we call it in the southern hemisphere, a wildfire, some sort of socio-technical failure of some form. And if we lose electricity, it becomes very quickly a technological threat, is that there are many things that rely on in modern society driven by electricity. That can quickly become a social threat. Many of us who have had children that need their iPads charged up, or us as adults also have our own iPads or iPhones or other handheld devices, if we don't have electricity, it becomes a social impact in our personal space. Equally, if we don't have potable water and we don't have water treatment plants, we have a biological manifestation of threat. So one disturbance can manifest in different areas of our modern lives. So disturbances are never simple. They may begin as a simple trigger of some phenomena, some loss of function, but they quickly emerge as complex impacts through time. So the notion of cascading effect. Next, please, Harriet. So how can we look at these cumulative effects? And where does planning and where does this notion of business continuity or regional continuity planning come from? We can imagine the first emergent issue or threat, but there's always preconditions. History and many, many great analyses of socio-technical failures through time have told us that there's always the weak signals of emergent harm or emergent disturbance. So there are elements in the preconditioning area, the triggering events that will trigger an emergent issue which has a disruptive effect, and there are secondary, tertiary and further on impacts, some of which become triggers for other cascading phenomena. So the ripple effect of a rock in the pool, but make that into three-dimensional human space, environmental space, etc. So the effects feed back as well as feeding forward. So the idea of disturbances as with cascading effects that have cumulative effect through time is central to looking at the disturbances that can occur to regional and local economies and whole national economies. One of the modelling elements that I was involved with some years ago was looking at foot and mouth disease in Australia. And the modelling looked at a range of cascading impacts through time, some of which suggested that it would take at least 6 to 7 years before the real economy of an affected region recovered from that emergent animal disease. So through time, there are a range of effects that we have to consider and have to plan for. Next, please, Harriet. And one of the elements of resilient communities, not wanting to reinvent the wheel, this particular element of mandala of health, as it used to be called when Trevor Hancock from Canada created it and published it some years ago, is based on the Brundtland report from Norway for the UN 37 years or maybe 38 years ago now. it is still extremely viable, and it was formed the basis of some of our thinking in the paper. The notion here is that a resilient community or region has at least three major components in blue. The community has to be convivial, it has to have cohesiveness and work together well. The ambient and built environment has to be viable, it has to be sustained, it has to deliver the sorts of essential service systems that community requires. And the local economy has to be adequately prosperous in that it generates wealth, it generates services that are purchased and exchanged at that local level. Now, the qualifiers of all of the three blue elements are livability, sustainability, and equitable exchange, equitable access to services. So coming from the Brundtland report all those many years ago, we have the basis of what the attributes could be construed to be for a resilient community. And those of you who will look at the chapter will appreciate that this has been adapted to apply and be a lens of analysis for the regional Finnish communities in the context of how we've used it. Next, please, Harriet. So the business continuity element of the work is that if we look at a range of identification, planning and implementation phases of a contingency and continuity planning motif, this operates in businesses regularly. It can operate as a national resilience and national continuity planning protocol as well, in the sense that what are the sources of disturbance? In the earlier figure of the cascading effects, primary, secondary and tertiary, there was the precursor events. What is known to have happened in the past? What is suspected to be happening potentially closer to time zero? And what is potential? So there's a range of knowledge about emergent sources of harm and disturbance. So if we're looking at a regional continuity, regional security, regional safety flavour or lens, what could disturb the local community? What could disturb the local business, the local governance? Then if we know the sources of harm and disturbance, we can ask the question of what are the critical human, virtual and physical assets of the region and community that need to be protected? Where are they vulnerable? And how might the sources of disturbance impact on those critical human, virtual and physical systems? The next phase of the thinking would be, okay, how do you mitigate the harm given that the human, virtual and physical components are at risk of being impacted by the disturbance? How do you prevent? How do you reduce the likelihood? Are there vulnerabilities? Are there protocols that can be put in place? Is there investment in certain capital changes within infrastructure systems that can make them more robust and therefore less likely to be impacted by the disturbances? What are those strategies? Document those. If those critical systems are impacted, are there workarounds that can be put in place? So some semblance of systems or access to services can be maintained while the regular systems are brought back on to mainstream line operations. What are the continuity plans that your alternative workaround thinking would be put into? They're going to be response, they're going to be continuity of function and service and recovery back to established norms subsequent to things rendering safe. Then the other element here is test and evaluate the plans and then test again with other groups and other agencies. Now by that, by extension, other communities share the continuity thinking of one community group with another. Local government associations, certainly in my part of the planet, do this sort of thing, some well, some less well. But one of the critical things is that you don't need to learn the lessons yourself every time. If you benchmark and share lessons learned before they are lessons forgotten, there is a continuity and sustainability investment that comes back, or should I say dividend from the investment that comes back. So the notion here is regions within Finland can be more crisis ready by thinking about where the human, virtual and physical assets that make that community normal and viable and healthy, how can we understand where they might be impacted and how they might be impacted by either internal to country disturbances or external ones, or even human extraterritorial in terms of climate change, weather variability, etc. So the notion here is that this sort of thinking occurs in business. It can occur in local settings. It can occur at national security settings. Next, please, Harriet. Now, Petri made mention of the EU work. There's a lot of very, very envious eyes in this part of the world looking at what the EU currently do. And I must say that the Scandinavian approach to supply chain continuity and crisis readiness has been recognised in the south of the planet, certainly where I work and live, as being the sorts of things that Australia needs or should try to emulate. So there's a lot of very useful pre-established work and thinking in Scandinavia and obviously in the EU. Next, please, Harriet. And I have read with great interest your former president's work for the EU. And every time I've seen him on video, I've thought to myself, well, I wish we had a head of state like him in Australia rather than a carrier of a crown of another country. But having said that little bit of political statement, could we go to the next slide? Because there are elements in the Safer Together report that I think are extremely relevant here. The top white dot, leveraging full public-private cooperation. The notion of the theoretical parts of the paper was that local public and private cooperation and co-development of these sorts of strategic continuity planning and thinking is extremely useful. It's good to see that this particular report for the EU references that as a leverage point and an enabler of viability at the local regional level. The next is looking at dual use potential. If you are starting to look at something that may be from a natural hazard that will impact essential services in your community, protecting the essential services from that source of threat will double up and have a dual benefit from other sources of disturbance as well. If we look to the bottom of the right-hand column, harnessing local economic activities. Our experience in Australia from bushfires and natural hazards is that local economy recovery is as important of individual, family and regional economy. So bringing the preparedness back, investing in the local economy is critical. To the left, empowering citizens. Societal resilience and preparedness, in my experience and the theoretical work that I've worked in and practical activities, citizenry, empowered, co-collaborating, what are the issues for them? And moving vertically, enabling the region to function under all circumstances. The notion of continuity planning is that it can be applied to any source of harm or disturbance. So if we just go to the end. One more slide, Harriet, thank you. There are three critical questions about disruptive events from the past and the future. What could happen? How might the disturbance occur? And what might the impacts be? And how they can be mitigated. Next button, please, Harriet. But there's two more presses, please. So what could happen? Has it happened before, and under what conditions might it happen again? So that's the continuity planning cycle, looking for new vulnerabilities, new sources of harm. Do direct or indirect causal conditions exist that increase the likelihood now of another disturbance or into the future? If into the future, is it imminent or is there time? And the last one, how might the impacts be mitigated? Are there skills required for intervention? Do we understand the capabilities needed at the local, regional and national level, in fact? So the scalability factors. And are the required capability capacities known? And if they are known, have they been invested in at the federal, regional and local level? So that's the basis of the theoretical components of the chapter. And what I think can be done across Scandinavia and Finland in particular is that the great work that's been done by the Irwin project, obviously, and the Scandinavian approach to contingency and crisis management and supply chain continuity is an application of business continuity planning. These sorts of ideas can be applied to local and regional continuity and resilience as well. It's just a matter of collaborating, looking at very simple questions about what value must be maintained at the local and regional level, to sustain resilience. And those answers must be dependent on individual economies, individual nation states, and with specific differences at the local and regional level. So the dialogue has to be had vertically integrated and laterally integrated. So I think at the end of my presentation here, I think the theory behind what we are looking at in this chapter has been proven in the real world. Continuity management, continuity planning, how it can be applied to impact for the benefit of Finnish people in the local and regional world of Finland and Scandinavia and potentially Europe is a debate that is not a difficult debate, it's a discussion about options and opportunities. So thank you for that, and I appreciate the time to talk about the theoretical components, and I will looking forward to handing it to Harriet to talk about the application of this thinking. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for very, very interesting presentation. Unfortunately, we don't have time now for the questions, but we have reserved like a half an hour at the end of the seminar. So please make notes, and then you have an opportunity to ask questions from our presenters. And the next speaker will be Dr. Harriet Lonka from Pohjois-Savon Regional Council, and the title of the presentation is Creating a Resilient Region. Please, Harriet, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Petri. I hope you can hear me. I had to change the view because I'm also running these slides.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. And thanks for your attention and for participating today on this webinar on my behalf as well. And really, I'm happy that we have been able to work together with Paul. Actually, we wrote our paper like in autumn 2023, before even I started my work at building the comprehensive security cluster here in North Savo. But I think our findings and ideas are rather well fitting to also this actual real work we have been now doing in North Savo for 1.5 years. Of course, the background for this, that we have the project to create a comprehensive security cluster, it's based on the fact that we have this Finnish comprehensive security model as a background, and it can be found in the government resolution on safeguarding the security strategy for society. It's called this document, and it's about safeguarding the vital functions of society. And that is very specific, and that's what we are referring to when we talk about the Finnish comprehensive security model. It's that it's a cross-sectional sectoral activity, and it has kinds of identified those 7 vital functions, which is focusing on, and it's given the responsibility of the ministries to guide the safeguarding of these functions, but also it gives very important role to cooperation in the government, but also it guides the society's preparedness activities at all levels, from the central government to regional and local public administrations, as well as it gives input for private sector and NGOs. And what comes to Eastern Finland, while we are working on this comprehensive security cluster activity in Eastern Finland, it's based on what has happened, very unfortunate developments during the recent years, the start of the Russian aggression in Ukraine in 2022, and all those developments that has then affected the Eastern Finland also very, very much economically and for the livelihood of the Eastern Finland, because of the end of the trade and activities with Russia, which used to be a very important partner for us in trade and other activities. And of course, then after these developments, the preparation of the Finnish membership in NATO, which then also realized 2023, and then there has been this activity to also create programmed plans for recovery and resilience in Finland, which is also now included in the regional development decision making at the government level. The North-Savo Comprehensive Security Cluster, the idea is to kind of demonstrate and realize how voluntary cooperation among various regional stakeholders can address the challenges of polycrisis. And it's very important, and what we have been looking at in our research is how this is functioning in relation to legally mandated collaboration between public sector actors, so that what it really means, this private and public partnership in these matters. And what we are interested in is of the evolution of the cooperative structures and their integration into the regional governance functions. And this is important for us to model and to understand, so that we can align it with the EU cohesion policy activities into the future. And we foresee that it is vital to have the economic success and growth, and this needs to be executed in reference to this new operating environment, which is trained by the fast evolving global and European security environment challenges. So then, when we talk about resilient region, how can this security cluster development support such creation? And I underline here that what we are working on as a EU as a cluster here, it differs somewhat of what we have at the moment as these EU smart specialization clusters. So maybe the difference or how we create a different aspect or functioning of a cluster is that this is a multidiscipline and multi-actor platform connecting the stakeholders widely in the field of comprehensive security in a regional dimension. And the important here is to think about what is the regional dimension in all this. And basically, the North-Savo Comprehensive Security Cluster intends to strengthen safety and security of supply know-how, foresight and innovation activities, and the development of new technologies by strengthening the cooperation of authorities, educational and research institutions, and business life. And as such, the cluster should strengthen and support activities of these existing smart specialization strategy functions in the region. And I believe that Bailey Lähdesmäki will also refer to these aspects in her comments. And the information production related to the cluster operations is planned to include analysis of changes in the operating environment, like continuously kinds of following up those changes at various levels, and then this to be linked to development of wider regional foresight work. And as Paul had already brought up this nice mandala picture, so it's we used it in the article to kind of bind together what we have our three research innovation smart specialization strategy spreadheads are those which are written here in blue. So we have them at food sector, health technology, tourism, smart water, biorefining, and then machine and energy sector and forest industry. So these are the smart specialization spreadheads for North Savo region, and these are such which vary between different regions, and that's the point of the regional development, that you build on the strengths you have, and you focus on and put your financial efforts and regional development funds to strengthen these strengths you have. And here we have then described how these are connected to these livable, sustainable, and equitable aspects of regional development, and as such creating the regional resilience. Then in our paper, if you look at it, then later on you can find these tables which are kinds of, this is kinds of a bit of preliminary analysis, but it is an analysis of certain aspects of what kinds of collaborative arrangements we have, and we have taken certain sectors or certain focus areas. So there is local economy, environmental and land use planning, security of supply, and national defense. And then we have looked at them in 3 levels, which are national, regional, and local level. And then in these levels, then focusing on separately private actors, public actors, and NGO actors, and then kinds of have an overview on how these collaborative arrangements are at the moment built, and what really might be lacking. And in this picture, we see that on this part of the table, I have three figures of this. So all these levels are presented in this presentation. So there at kinds of the national level, we can identify rather comprehensively what kinds of aspects we have for public sector. There is, for instance, a security of supply. The National Emergency Services Agency coordinates the cooperation of different businesses, and there is certain legislation, and this is what kinds of, when we talk about the Finnish model of security of supply, that's what we usually talk about. And also there on the NGO level, we have the industry associations who are hosting the polls of different parts of this national emergency organization, which is created by those 1,500 companies and businesses. So that's what we have at the national level. And so also in the national defense, we have very much of organized, not only the defense forces, but also that we have the suppliers and private sector and also NGOs working closely in connection to national defense in the national scale. And so forth for the environmental and land use planning, it's also guided from central government level and so forth. And we have very strong associations working on, for instance, the wind power and renewable energy issues and forest owners activities, which is very central for the Finnish economy in general. For regional level, then there seems to be some like kinds of gaps on how we organize the systems, and especially to our mind, there is, for instance, on security of supply. If we think of the NGO activity, it's not kinds of in focus of any specific NGO structure. So we have the Regional Entrepreneurs Association working kinds of for the local economy, and then we have the Forest Owners and Industry Association, which are very importantly participating in especially the new types of sharing the economic benefits of the natural resources management issues. But kinds of the focus, how would we take into account the security of supply at the regional level? That is one of those critical and central issues. Actually, we are now working on in the comprehensive security cluster work in the Pohjois-Savon region. So we are kind of intending to build a model also for the regional focus on the security of supply, which we feel is at the moment lacking. Local level then also there, of course, national defense obviously is national defense, so it is very much national function, and so obviously there is organization of national defense that there is how we manage the all to do with our national defense forces and so forth, also at the local level, but that's like kinds of activities of the national defense though. But at the local level, the NGO we have, so that kinds of national defense NGO activity goes all the way down to the local level, and that is obviously one part of the strengths we have in all the organization of our national defense. But really here also that we have for security of supply, there is the kinds of public sector, so the communities are participating as public organizations to these regional security and of supply activities, but also here we are lacking this NGO activity more or less. So that's one gap which needs to be given more attention to in future as one of the conclusions of or findings of our research and our paper. But I think there is a lots of details and so forth. But maybe this is enough about the general picture of the findings of the paper and what actually was theoretically understood, what comprehensive security cluster work might do, and then what it have also carried out now in the 1.5 years of function or work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Harriet, for an excellent presentation. I'm sure that there will be some questions and comments later on. But before that, I would like to give floor to Bailey Lähdesmäki, who will give a commentary note on comprehensive security cluster in the context of EU cohesion policy. So please, Bailey, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you to all the participants for joining us today, and also to the previous presenters. And a huge congratulations to an excellent article published in the book. Secondly, I would like to mention that all the thoughts and opinions I present today in the webinar are based on my own expertise, which has been gained through my own research and experience. And we can get kicked off right away. So let's move to the next slide. And one of the main reasons that it's such an interesting topic for our current situation is because we are at a pivotal point related to the EU cohesion policy, which is the EU's main investment policy, since the new program will come into effect in early 2026. And the purpose of the cohesion policy is to correct all of the, or hopefully the territorial imbalances. So it should be both proactive and reactive on an EU, national, regional, and local level. And this means for us that we should possibly take into account how we can be approaching this with an agile perspective, both as a reactive and proactive mindset. For us, we would like to make sure that we can reference this wonderful crisis continuum that Dr. Barnes presented. So this means that our policies and initiatives could even follow a similar model. For example, a trigger or an issue or an impact that would follow and its effects, and possibly even the simultaneous or cascading and cumulative characteristics, including the feedback loops, which we can see by this new cohesion policy coming into effect. Some other good examples of this in the policy framework could be the new European Innovation Agenda, the competitiveness compass that has been recently published, as well as the very, very recent omnibus package. And we'd be happy to share the references for you all later as well. And for us now, related to the comprehensive security cluster, it is extremely important, since it is a multidisciplinary topic, that we adopt this agile approach, because it means that we need to take a place-based approach. And for a place-based approach, some examples could be the smart specialization strategies and the partnerships for regional innovation pilots. We discussed previously about the smart specialization strategies, the S3s, but it might be a good idea to take a short look at the difference between the smart specializations and the research and innovation strategies for smart specialization. So RISC 3, and what is the difference there? So the, RISC 3, which is the research and innovation strategies for the smart specializations, is actually a formal EU cohesion policy instrument. So it is specifically translating the S3 concepts into the national or regional innovation agendas that can be used for the different kinds of research, innovation, and development actors. Some of the key features for RISC 3 are the entrepreneurial discovery process, or EDP, and the R&I focus, which means that we want to really explicitly align the research and innovation investments that we are choosing for the specific priorities that are a regional specialization. And then how are we able to monitor and ensure governance, structured governance? So we need to have the clear targets, the systems to monitor, and especially the review processes. Whereas the smart specializations don't have that definition or instrument as defined by the EU, but it's more of a conceptual framework for the regional economic development, and includes the 3 pillars, which would be the place-based approach, the prioritization, and the participation, which is extremely important when we're talking about how to engage the different types of stakeholders, from the private sector to the public authorities to research and education, as well as civil society. And nowadays, we're even including the environment as one of the stakeholder groups. Maybe the most important thing to take from this now is how are we able to align all of our regional smart specializations into a topic such as comprehensive security, which is multidisciplinary, multi-actor, and a horizontal topic. And this means that we need to ensure that it includes the economic viability, the social viability, and the environmental viability as strengths of the region. And this can take a region by region approach, and also including the different local specialties within the region. And one of the burning questions that we have related to the comprehensive security cluster and how it relates to the trickle-down effect of EU cohesion policy to a regional level is how are we able to ensure that those functions for a viable society are actually accurate? How are they determined to be true? Because as we know, the environment, the economy, social crises, they come and go. There's a huge flux nowadays, as we have seen in the past few years. So how do we validate that these are accurate? And we can move to the next slide. Thank you. We can validate that these are accurate based on the key objectives in the cohesion policy. So are these functions for a vital society relevant for the physical and digital infrastructure, for business development, for the research and innovation activities, for ensuring that the employment and training initiatives build the competence that is required from an industry point of view for a resilient region? And how are we able to ensure that our developments are following along with the low carbon and sustainability goals, and of course the hope to reduce poverty overall, since we are of course in the EU and we are living in the world, so making sure that everybody has a fair chance to live a good and successful life. I think that we are out of time for my session, but we can come back to some questions later on. Thank you.
So much, Bailey. That was an excellent presentation. I'm sure there will be a discussion later on. Now, Harriet, I would like to propose something. Would that be okay? And Paul, of course, would it be okay that we have Q&A now and then you make your conclusions, Paul, after that? Because it sounds a bit rude if you conclude the seminar and then we open up the discussion. If it's okay with you, I would like to bring in the people now. Okay,
that's
good.
fine.
Great. Okay, so we will now open up the discussion. Please raise your hand and ask the floor. You can make comments, questions, but keep them short. No mini lectures allowed. And please indicate to whom of the presenters you are placing the question. Who would like to be the first? Any? And of course, our panelists can also raise questions and comment each other's presentations. Maybe I start with Paul with your presentation. Just one remark. I very much like the idea when you brought the cascading effects and the system's dynamics and complexity into the picture. But then later on, you had a kind of a more linear or traditional model with the identifying, planning, and implementing. How do you see these two fitting together? Let's say the linear, like a preparedness thinking, and then the complexity thinking.
Petri, the cascading image is conceptual and practical together. The reason we had that in the chapter, and I developed it originally for a Southern Indian Ocean investigation into ecological risk assessment and security with India and France. The linear image in the other figure is more practical. How do you do it? Where do you start? So one was more conceptual, anticipatory of how we need to think, and the other one was practically how we start to think. So
okay.
What the linear model is from continuity planning and application of that thinking, and the cascading is, as you say, a systems dynamics notion. So one's theoretical, one's conceptual, one's aspirational, and the other one is practical. How do you start looking at where the value needs to be identified, and how you start to integrate those recognitions of the value elements, human, virtual, physical, into the broader security continuity planning thinking. So one's practical, one's aspirational.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So more questions and comments. Maybe I then place my question to Bailey, to your presentation. Interesting one, combining the let's say the cohesion policy objectives or smart specialization goals together with preparedness, and I very much like the idea of your comment on how to validate that we have chosen the right, let's say, the right phenomena in that field. How would you start the validation? From the regional priority perspective or from the preparedness perspective, and how to bridge these two together?
Thank you for the question, and it's actually one of the most difficult topics to tackle just because the structures and types of actors and their roles are so different in different regions. Not only the roles, but also the agency or competences that the organizations or individuals bring to the table. So I think that by looking both at the data, so both the trends, whether it's economic trends and economic data, education data, even publications, that hard data, which has to be validated, of course, in itself, can give some very good frameworks to see if the actions that you are trying to take align with the objectives that you're trying to reach, and seeing if they match up, and then validating that with actual human interviews and testimonials to see if it has reached down to the most grassroots level and if it's understood and implementable by everyday people, since civil society and citizens is one of the critical segments that needs to be engaged in order to create a resilient region.
Very good, very good. And then of course it gets more complicated when you take the interdependencies between these two areas, because then you really need to see also the let's say the dynamics created by the interdependency and the biases, of course. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, thank you. More questions and comments? Maybe one more to Harriet to treat everybody equally. We have been, doing work together in the fields of security of supply and preparedness in many different research projects, and we face the issue of very complicated and dispersed governmental structures, both at the national level, but also at the regional level. And now, when you work at the regional level, how do you see? Is it really, disturbing the regional preparedness that our ministries work in the silos, and there are, information gaps and maybe different situational awareness definitions from one governmental branch to another? How do you see it from the regional perspective, or is it only, administrative nitty-gritty discussion?
No, absolutely. You are right that it has an effect on regional level, because it's we are lacking the counterparts. So the interaction from central level to the regional level is flawful. And if you think of now, then when we have the regional developments of also the state regional administration, which is going to merge to more larger units, and it's becoming very fuzzy, and then there is a discontinuity between the state supervision to the local level, to the communities, and then the regional level is left there also in between. So I think it is very complex and really unclear system at the moment. And somehow, because I'm an idealist always and optimist, so I'm thinking that if our work to create this new comprehensive security focused regional development, that it could work as kinds of a tool to break these silos. And I'm thinking a bit, there was quite a lot of this kinds of sustainable development analogies and references in our presentations, both in Paul's and Bailey's and mine. So that this is one field what we have been kinds of demoing with till now, how we can work like cross-sectional. So maybe if we add this comprehensive security and resilience view, that might help us get further. So that's my optimistic view for future.
Okay, very good. It's good to be optimistic. There's I was going to ask about another tendency that I really see. There's a kind of a shift towards let's say a new top-down control in many areas of the society. You can see it in the welfare regions now when the government is taking the budgetary control over the welfare regions. There's the tendency now with the regional government, let's say central government regional agency reform, the AVI reform, it's taken now to the central level instead of giving power to the region. So it's a kind of a mixed situation at the moment. We on the other hand talk about the regional, the importance of regional development, the regional ecosystems, and at the same time we are like re-centralizing policies. But maybe we don't open up the discussion now, especially when Heikki has a hand there and is prepared to have a question. Please, Heikki.
Thank you. Mine is more of a comment, but working as the regional development manager in Pohjois-Savon, I'm thinking about the regional implementation of this kind of thinking to the regional development. And what I've gathered from the discussion, what interested me the most perhaps is this ideas of business continuity planning and supply chain continuity, because I think that these are very interesting from the business perspective. I think the regional actors might be very prepared to take on this kind of initiatives, and I think also that EU's regional and structural policies provide us instruments to support that. So that would be one of the key things that I would like to start to implement this kind of work in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Heikki. When you are meeting the representatives of the business community, are they talking about the CER directive and its implementation? Are they familiar with that topic, or does it have any importance at the regional level?
Well, at the moment I have been working on the regional strategic program for the next 4 years, and I have been doing interviews with different kind of businesses, and I've also quite systematically asked questions about the comprehensive security perspective. I think that the SER has appeared in these discussions, but I have the impression that it's not very widely recognized at the moment, at least to my experience.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Any other questions or comments?
I might add some about this discussion about the business continuity. We have now carried out interview round of 37 mostly SMEs, most of them in the field of machinery and metal industries, but many others as well. And I think what I found I'm kind of happy about is that those companies we have discussed with have been very they have rather naturally seen those many aspects of business continuity, especially now what comes to the availability of raw materials like critical materials and employment issues. Kinds of we talk about security of supply of knowledge and skills and these kinds of issues. So that we often think too much, to my mind, that businesses have some kinds of living in some other world where only you only do your everyday work and try to increase the income, like that's the only focus. But there is a lots of this, and I think there is a lots of potential for that kinds of development what Heikki was referring to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And then Jarmo, please.
Thank you. I have kind of remark or comment based on Harriet's presentation or question that could there also be a sub-local level in this presentation. I'm thinking the difference between big cities and small communities, that here in Helsinki we don't even know our neighbors. So in a crisis situation we don't have that help as easily as in small communities. People survive much easier in small or even bigger crisis situation, and maybe they have a kind of resilience, better resilience to survive in different situations. And how do you see this? And is there a difference between big cities and where we stand alone at the bus stops 2 meters distance from each other and we don't even know our neighbors?
Thank you.
That is a good question. Thank you. It's at our work in North-Savo, we are also focusing on the villages and their activities, and there actually is a lots of activities to improve the resilience, like very practical but also conceptual means and creating networks and so forth. And when I live in Kuopio, which has like 600 active farms. It's a city of Kuopio, and that's a bit of a problem. I think we have in Finland, that we talk about cities and we think that cities are about to drinking latte in a bar, and actually there can be active farms and things. And so I often think that what we have for instance, in the villages, these active, for instance, preparedness work. I could have it. I come from Roihuvuori in Helsinki, which is 20,000 inhabitants suburb, and I think there you could have exactly the same structures and thinking and ways of increasing the resilience and preparedness. So I think there is also our mindset should be more widened up to this sub-local thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Jarmo. That was an excellent remark. And then Paul, please.
Yes, thank you, Petri. Jarmo, I think preparedness starts in the village green. You're totally right. And one of the elements of what we were trying to do in the article was go to the most appropriate level that government and bigger business would notice. But from a realpolitik and reality world, we have to focus on communities as part of the picture, and that can come down to the family unit as well as a key component of a community that's active. And I think the original mandala of health that came through the Brundtland report was focused. You could focus that central circle on families or clusters of groups, families within communities, and part of the scalability of the thinking that we were trying to put on the page was that you can start at the most simple, minute element of the system and escalate up to a national level. Some parts of that scale from sub-micro, micro, meso to macro, there may be difficulty in seeing the connections between the scaled elements, but critically, the importance of having communities active and involved in their local community, people living comfortably with confidence and safety and protection, decisions made by themselves, made by the community, but also supported by policy and legislation that works from local governance through to national governance. The notion of scalability in all of these questions is critical. And you're totally accurate that community level is a focus that often is difficult to put into the larger policy planning, but I totally agree.
Thank you, Paul. Then Bailey.
Yes, I actually wanted to add along to the same lines of thought that it seems like it requires reaching a critical mass, whether that's on a family basis, on a tribal basis, on a small rural village community basis, or on a large metropolis basis. So whatever that critical mass is, once it's reached, it'll start to break off. And of course, the characteristics that help reach that critical mass limit will change place by place and time by time. And it's hard to know what those characteristics are to reach that limit. And that's also why it's good for us to know that this can happen organically or by design, as discussed in the article, and being aware of what are those organic elements or what are the initiatives that will encourage a by design approach will help when we're trying to create structures and models, both from the ground up and top down.
Great, thank you so much. You wrote to the chat about the European Commission's omnibus package, which is an attempt to reduce administrative burden for the companies caused by sustainability regulation, while taking care of the responsibilities, but still not overburdening the companies. Would you like to say something about the package for our audience, and maybe later when people listen this discussion online? So what the package is all about and how you see it from the regional perspective or from the ecosystem perspective. Yeah.
Certainly. And my comment was related to how we are attempting to support business continuity. And one of the attempts from the EU is with this omnibus package. As you said, while still aligning with the sustainability goals, but reducing the burden and enabling the private sector to increase its research, development, and innovation, but in a sustainable and responsible way. So, for example, this means that the private sector is able to remain and hopefully increase its competitiveness and the advantages that we would have in the EU compared to the other parts of the world, which in turn would hopefully allow us to become more resilient in ourselves and have a better supply chain within our borders. And the omnibus package in general, yes, it is hopefully trying to reduce the administrative burden, and that includes the reporting directives, the due diligence directives, the regulations related to taxonomy, as well as the, for example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So there are quite a few different frameworks that are put together under the omnibus package. But overall, it's trying to simplify how the companies are required to report their sustainability practices. And this is important for large organizations all the way down to SMEs, especially when the large organizations are requiring more sustainability reporting from their suppliers and providers, which in turn will give the SMEs a huge competitive advantage when trying to build up their business and develop their products and services for international markets. Of course, national markets as well. And this really helps our regional development by understanding what are the opportunities for the companies and how we can help support them and align with these opportunities, but also what kinds of legislation they'll need to follow in the future.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's a good example of a new, let's say, the cross-horizontal thinking of the policies. You combine the environmental goals together with the business or competitiveness goals, and that is something we probably need more also at the national level, given the governmental silos that exist at the moment. Yes. Okay, any more questions or comments before giving floor to Paul for final conclusions? If not, then please, Paul, floor is yours.
Thank you, Petri. I'll be brief in the sense that one of the challenges that all economies on the planet face is harmonizing policy and legislation across silos. And one of the elements that I've always thought as a practitioner in crisis management is young lawyers who have to write legislation should be cross-skilled into economics, policy making, environmental impact assessment, security assessments, and a range of other skills. Because if you have a complex picture to paint, you need a complex palette that has multiple colours that is applied in relevant ways. So in order to understand not so much the challenges of Scandinavia and Finland and the EU in general, but the opportunities. Now, we've mentioned foresight thinking. Bailey's mentioned it, the whole notion of what comes next, what could come next. Denmark has had a protocol called the Pandora Forward-Looking Cell. It's been established for many years. It may not be currently used, but Denmark had a very interesting way of looking at foresight. The EU and the OECD, obviously based in Paris, but part of the EU, has a brilliant economically flavoured forward-looking capacity and capability. There was a true 2020 joint study with Finland, Norway and Sweden on security of supply and critical infrastructure protection. Again, looking at complex connections that provide essential services that we always assume will be available, but when it isn't, we are in shock. So the whole notion of crisis and risk and forward thinking is we anticipate where the failure may come and how we can tighten the bolts, if I may use that very bland and probably inappropriate metaphor. Also, there is the Finnish National Supply Agency and the National Emergency Supply Agency, I should say. A brilliant institution that I've written in Australia, we need one like it, or at least one that has the same goals of a emergency supply agency. Focuses on making sure there are no surprises, but being able to anticipate the weak signals of a surprise. So some of the things that I think are useful, the application at the right level, starting from the community, the family group to the national, but communities of practice. If we're looking at various regions within Finland, for example, that have different foci and different strengths in certain industries or certain elements of economic, socio-economic activity, communities of practice, they're not unions, but they're communities of practice that work together that have a common endpoint, but may have different elements of the puzzle that they can bring together. Certainly here we're working on communities of practice of One Health, zoonotic transmission, crossover. So we want to be ready for the next pandemic, and it may be a much more trickier sort of set of circumstances than the last one. But communities of practice that focus locally, regionally and nationally. We have the national institutions, but opening them up a little bit more so there are no silos of excellence that talk to each other rather than amongst each other. And horizon scanning, anticipate the bump. Good planning and good anticipation will reduce the surprise, and the surprises will continue to come, in my view. But, you know, if we're looking for a final metaphor from me, Winston Churchill, in the fall of Singapore, the impregnable sort of island that was a battleship in the ocean, a castle, impregnable castle. When it fell, he asked a couple of questions, and this is an institutional, national question. He asked, why didn't I know? Why wasn't I told? And why didn't I ask? And why didn't I tell what I knew? So that question was, there must have been signs that Singapore was at risk. Impregnable. It was only safe because there was a bridge that they could blow up between Malaysia and the islands. Unfortunately, the Japanese forces moved very quickly and with greater skill than the foresight of the British forces. So anticipate what can go wrong and to anticipate what can go right. It's a positive thing to look at the positive elements of planning. But if we don't bring the local communities along in that journey, from a national perspective, there won't be sustainable benefit for all.
Thank you so much, Paul. And it's time to close the seminar now. I would like to thank the North-Savo Comprehensive Security Cluster and Harriet for organizing this event. Extremely interesting discussion, and it will continue after this seminar. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much, Bailey, for your presentations and discussions, and thank you for the audience and listeners also online. And would you like to say something, Harriet, before we close? On my behalf, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a great experience, and to have all these different views. And I know our article was and is very wide in its goals, and to combine this like EU cohesion policy and the global developments and business continuity and crisis management aspects. I think I'm very proud of what we have been trying to do, and I hope we can continue with this journey together and find the next interesting questions and then some answers. Thank you for today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.